So let's fly over the Hintsa TVET college campuses. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see that the reason why I've chosen this kind of front view is that the Hinsa TVET colleges are located between two rivers. On your right, you've got the Mbashi River, and then on your left, you've got the Great Kai River. Now, historically, the land between these two rivers was called Galeka land. And King Hinsa, king of the Xhosa, the fourth king of the Xhosa actually, was from the Galeka lineage. So that's one of the reasons why these colleges are called King Hinsa. But more important than that, he's actually a martyr of the Xhosa people in their struggles and fight against the colonial British as they were coming through from the Cape Colony. He was actually captured by the British. He was murdered by the British. His body was desecrated and he's become a symbol of resistance. In fact, we have a medal of bravery, the King Hinsa medal. So let's explore this set of TVET colleges. And to do that, we are going to fly over the Great Kai. Now, the reason why I want to start over here is because it's a river of great historical significance. So, for example, you've got the Transkei, one of the old homelands, that would be on your right across the Kai. And then you've got the Ciskei, this side of the Kai. You have a situation where you had in the Xhosa people, what happened was under one of their first kings, the lineage kind of split. And on this side, you have the Hrabe, and on the other side, you have the Galeka. So you have this long historical story about why this river is so important. But most crucially, you'll see that it's got ravines, it's got valleys. It was a very difficult boundary to penetrate. So it was a place of many fights between the Boers and the Xhosa and between the British and the Xhosa. So we're flying into the King Hinsa TVET College at Centane or Kentane. And I just want to briefly set the scene about the Hinsa TVET College as a whole. Historically, it's really struggled. When it was set up in around 2002, the campuses were in a terrible state. The technical colleges were not really functional, and it actually got worse. The money that was allocated to the college was poorly spent. The King Hinsa TVET College had to go under administration. There were investigations of corruption. There have been all sorts of student protests about the quality of the teaching, about the quality of the infrastructure. But recently what's happened is there's been a slow turnaround, and I want to talk to that and how that works in this region. Now, the Centane College is one of the colleges that hasn't really been improved. And basically it's almost like a satellite college because it only really offers hospitality and tourism. And that's both in the NCV and the N4. You can do hospitality and you can do tourism. That's it on this campus. Now, I'm going to pull back, and as I do that, I'm going to pull back over the Great Kai River again because of its enormous historical significance. And what you'll see as we pull over it is we are now moving across into the Teko campus, which is at Butterworth. Now, Butterworth has got a really complex history. It was a small little town. Just an outpost. There was a fort there at one stage, but really only had a couple of hundred people staying there. And what happened was the apartheid government identified it as being a node of development for their whole decentralization strategy. The idea was they'd try to create these industrializing manufacturing points inside the homelands to enable employment and make the homelands attractive. It was completely artificial. Initially, when they just provided tax breaks, it didn't work. And eventually they had to pay the industrialists and the manufacturers to move here with massive, not only discounts, but actual money for each person that they employed. So there was an artificial boom in this area. And that happened in the 1980s. But the problem with an artificial boom and with the transition to democracy is that all of that basically collapsed in the 1990s. By that stage, the community had had enough with these apartheid manufacturers who were paying minimal wages. But at the same time as that, they were desperate for some of the money that was being provided. So it created enormous tensions in the area, big strikes. And currently Butterworth is really not in the best space it could be. But one of the things that has happened is that they've invested in this new campus, and you can see it's got really good facilities. It's located right next to Walter Sisulu University. It's also the main office, and it offers almost all the programs that you could hope for. It's got electrical, civil, mechanical engineering. It's got bricklaying and carpentry, and you can do agricultural management, and you can do primary agriculture. So it's the main engineering campus. And it's also the place of enormous investment, where they're now spending a lot of money on a new residence system, 800 beds. So that's what you can hear as I was trying to set up what's going on at the college. There's been an attempt to improve the college. But one of the problems is that those residences should have been built a long time ago. And there's been this continual promise for the residents, but then it doesn't happen. So we're now flying down through to the Duchawa campus. And you'll hear from the language in this area. It's full of clicks and kas and kos. So I really apologize if I'm not getting the pronunciations quite right. Now again, you'll notice with this campus that it's going to be a really well-built campus, a recent campus, also next to a hospital which is also fairly recent. And the Duchawa region, interestingly enough, is where Thabo Mbeki was born. And one of the things we've got to start to think about is, how is it that this area and the surrounding areas has produced so many of our black intellectual leaders and our political leaders over the past century? And I'll talk to that a little bit later on. Now, just to say that the Duchawa campus offers the NCV in IT and computer studies. You can do management, marketing, you can do public management, you can do public development, you can do public relations. Now you'll notice that this campus is really well set out. It's very new, and there's been a slow shift away from the students protesting about the fact that they are 16 to a room, that they don't have any services. That was even in the 2014 report. When I read the parliamentary report, the administrator was trying really hard to turn things around, but he was seriously struggling. And slowly but surely you get a sense that this college is going from one of the worst in the country through investment to one that's slowly but surely improving. Now we're going to pull out over the Mbashe River. Now for those of you that have watched some of the other videos, you'll know that on the other side of the Mbashe River is the old historical Tembu land, and that's where you have King Sabata, Dalindyebo campuses. So you have these two sets of campuses and colleges named after two different kings in the area. The one on the left named after the Tembu king, Dalindyebo, and the one on the right named after the Xhosa king, King Hinsa. But this is also the birthplace of Nelson Mandela, and that's why I'm taking a slow ride through Kunu. It's the place where you have, just further up on the one side, you have Chris Hani, you've got Walter Sisulu being born in this area. And we have to interrogate why it is that they've come from this particular location. Look, it's astonishingly beautiful. But the accounts which I've read as I've thought about this issue is that there's this strange combination of missionary education, where a lot of those guys landed up in a situation where they went to Lovedale and they went to good schools, but they went to British schools, and they landed up being able to work across two cultures. They were able to see the colonial history, for example. When they went and did the colonial British history curriculum, they were horrified by the account of the way things were working in the world, because they had direct experience from their own fathers and mothers about what was really going on in these areas. So they got this massive cultural contrast which enabled them to negotiate between two worlds in a way which was critical and in a way which engaged. Because not only that, this place was a place of massive struggle over hundreds of years. In fact, the Xhosa British Wars, the Frontier Wars, was the longest war the British ever fought against any people. It stretched over 100 years. Any people in Africa, that is. So this is a really fascinating terrain. Now we're flying over the HB Tsengwa campus. He was a UDM leader, one of the leaders of the opposition to the Transkei, and also one of the leaders that moved forward into the new South Africa. And we're actually now in the old Willowvale area, and this campus offers the NCV in finance, economics and accounting. You can do office administration over here. You can do the NATED in financial management, human resources, and you can be a management assistant over here. And what you'll hear as we move through these different areas is there's been a systematic attempt to rename these areas. So for example, this used to be called Willowvale, because it is located near a river. And by the way, this is also the region just a bit further down where King Hinsa was murdered. And it wasn't a happy murder. It wasn't like if I can put it that way. It was really badly done. There should be respect for royalty, at least, certainly within traditional areas. He was hunted down. He was shot a couple of times. His body was hacked. They got his ears off. They tried to get his teeth out. So there's a very ugly part to the story over here. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why the intellectuals over here were able to use some of the Western British educational side, but they knew without a doubt that they had to challenge and resist the colonialists coming through. They weren't subverted. They weren't, how would we put it? They weren't seduced by what the British were offering, although they took what they could from it. So now we're pulling out over this land which I've been describing from the Mbashi River on your right, the little view of King Dalyandebo's TVET colleges and Tembu land on your right as well. And we're going to pull over so we get a full sight of this land between the Mbashi and the Great Kai rivers, where the Xhosa people lived and fought and resisted for hundreds and hundreds of years. Worked with the San and the Bushmen, as you can see from the Nkas and the Keks, and are now trying through the TVET college that we've just visited to try and address some of the historical wrongs which were done through the apartheid system with the homelands in this area and that stupid story of Butterworth into a place which has some kind of investment and offers some kind of opportunity for the students in this area.